Hello, my name is Jitterz and welcome to the channel. It's been a while, I will say, but today I have a real special video for you guys. In this video, I'm going to be talking about how to actually climb in Valorant from any rank to the next rank. I'm going to be going over a lot of things that I've seen and what I've noticed that in general are the things that I see need improvement when going from one rank over to the next. Of course, there will be some outliers as there is with anything. Some people can just, carry themselves all the way to plat or diamond with just their aim. But for the average player who's just starting out or, you know, is stagnant in where they are, a lot of the times it takes more than just playing more games and getting your aim better. Sometimes you actually do have to take other steps. And in this video, I'm hoping to actually shed light on some of those steps. First thing to understand is there's a lot of fundamentals you'll need to master if you want to hit the higher ranks of the game. Of course, there's stuff like crosshair placement, which is extremely important. You're also going to have to master the movement in Valorant. In order to get to the higher ranks, like there has to be a level of fluency with movement. It's really hard to explain, but once you start getting better at the movement in Valorant, you'll start to understand that it almost becomes second nature to be able to like move in this game. There's also other things like your communication and your ability usage, which again take time, and there's also a lot of other things like understanding the economy in Valorant. Tracking ultimates is pretty important, and there's other game sense things like understanding timings, knowing how long rotations take, having a good sense of when to use your abilities, when to throw down a smoke, when should I be flashing. These are all things that take time, and in order to get to the higher ranks of the game, you're going to have a good understanding of these things, and a lot of it has to do with just practice and time put into the game. But with that being said, let's get into the ranks. So starting with Iron, a lot of they're not really mistakes per se, but there are big things that I noticed that I do believe are the reason that a lot of people are stuck, or some people are stuck at this rank. And those are: one, poor equipment and settings. This is honestly probably the biggest thing. I can't tell you how many times I've asked an Iron player to share their screen for me, and they literally either can't share their screen because their computer just can't handle it, or they're showing me their screen and they're playing on like 24 or 30 FPS. It's honestly like extremely difficult to play on settings like that, and just improving your equipment could honestly be the difference maker in getting you up to the next rank. The other one is settings in general. A lot of them for some reason have really weird like key bindings. They'll like randomly change their abilities to random keys on the keyboard instead of keeping them somewhere close. It's alright to change where your keys are binded to, but make sure it's comfortable for you and you're able to actually switch between abilities. And then most importantly is the sensitivity. A lot of times it's way more often the case that their sensitivity is just way too high. It's so easy to tell when you're watching them play. They just can't control their sensitivity. In my opinion, just Google what the average player is using for their sense. Just take their sensitivity. It's going to feel very slow when you start using it, but over time you will adjust. Start doing that now so that as you climb, it'll feel natural to be at that lower sensitivity as you climb. The next thing is that they just don't understand the basics of the game. This is honestly going to be a given when you're this low in the rank. There's a lot of things that, you're expected to be able to do that Irons just can't. When it comes to recommended agents, in my opinion, you should be going for agents that are very, very simple. I honestly wouldn't stress too much about utility at all. I wouldn't worry about smokes. I wouldn't worry about your flashes. I wouldn't worry about pretty much anything utility based. I suggest sticking to characters like Sage. I like Reyna and Phoenix. And what I like about these agents is that although they do have stuff like flashes, Sage has like her wall and stuff, just having that utility of being able to heal yourself is honestly all you're going to realistically need in Iron. A lot of times people in Iron are not going to know how to use a molly properly. They're not going to even understand like how to flash somebody so that they actually get hit by the flash. I just focus on aiming and just forget about utility altogether, and you'll honestly have a much easier time getting out of this rank. So when it comes to Iron, if you want to climb, the first thing you have to do is just stop moving and shooting. When I say like basics of the game, this is probably the biggest one that I see a lot of Irons not getting. A lot of times they're still moving like very frantically while they're shooting instead of taking the time to stop and then aim their shot. And this alone is enough to honestly get you out of this rank. If you just stop moving before you shoot, you'll probably climb fairly quickly out of Iron. The next thing is just play more games. I know there are some Iron players that have played a ton of games, but honestly, from what I've seen, they're very few and far between. If you are one of the people who have played a ton of games, I would suggest looking towards the the first step. And then the last thing is just don't worry about utility. As I said before, most of the time your utility usage is like honestly quite poor, you know, to put it lightly. The utility that you are using is not really helping you win games, or I suggest just focusing on just the shooting mechanics and getting those down, and those alone will easily carry you up to bronze if you just work on them and play consistently. Moving on, let's get to bronze. In bronze, the common mistakes I always see are one is really bad crosshair placement. It's not just, you know, their crosshair isn't on the head. A lot of times, bronze players specifically like to run while staring at the ground. If you can just make sure your crosshair is within even just body level, just so that if an enemy does walk up in front of you, your crosshair is in a decent enough spot that you'll at least be able to shoot and get some damage on them. And then of course, understanding like headshot level would be great. And if you're able to get that in bronze, you will definitely climb very, very quickly if you can just like hit heads more consistently just because your crosshair placement's better. The next thing I notice is they have very, very suboptimal utility usage. Of course, in iron, this is definitely a problem, but in bronze, this is where you might need to start understanding the basics of utility, especially when it comes to like how to use a flash or the basics of like how and where to smoke. When it comes to recommended agents, the only one I added here is Brimstone. This is because unlike the previous rank, I truly do believe that in bronze, you should start to learn how to smoke. One thing I've noticed in bronze especially is the operator is just extremely, extremely powerful in this rank. And if you don't have smokes, it's like way too easy for a bronze player to like hit you in the body with the op. The skill required to use at those ranks where the movement's as bad as it is, and how easy it is to hit those shots in the rank, make it so you basically need to know how to smoke. And I think taking over that role for your team is honestly a very easy way to climb, just because if you're able to smoke the op off and get your whole team on site without anyone dying, that could be enough to just carry the games. When it comes to how to climb, the first thing is, this is where I would recommend watching videos about the game, especially when it comes to utility. Just know where do higher ranked players, like just knowing where they smoke is probably the most important thing. Think like on bind, where do I smoke? On Ascent, where are the common smokes? On Haven, where are the common smokes? And just knowing where to smoke on site executions, it just wins games, period. And if you're able to get that down, you'll definitely see like a huge, huge boost in your elo. The second thing is to start warming up before playing. And it's not just warming up, it's specifically practicing a lot of these concepts like the crosshair placement. Focus on just keeping your crosshair at head level and only move your crosshair horizontally instead of vertically. Over time of starting to do that in bronze, eventually having your crosshair around head level is just going to be like second nature, and you're not going to have to think about it, and it's just going to be like a muscle memory thing. And then the last thing is just focusing on your crosshair when in game. Again, it's not going to be second nature at this point, so a lot of times you need to just quickly mentally remind yourself like, oh, is my crosshair at head level? And then just compare your crosshair with maybe like one of your teammates' heads, and just use that as like a quick reference, especially like before a round starts, and just try to hold that position, and you'll notice you're just gonna start hitting headshots a lot more consistently. So when it comes to the biggest mistakes I see in silver, the one is poor positioning, and the second one is not peeking properly. So when it comes to positioning, a lot of it is very, very simple things. For example, just like for some reason, people like to just stand in the open with no cover, so that when an enemy peeks them, they pretty much have to take the fight. Another big thing is not positioning properly for the weapon that they are purchasing. I've seen so many people play in like cheesy, like close angles with like a Phantom or a Vandal. And that can work, and you will catch some people off guard sometimes, but at the same time, it's better to save those positions for when you have like, you know, a shotgun. Just understanding the range of your weapons and playing in positions that allow you to take advantage of those ranges is very important. The other part was, of course, not peeking properly. In bronze, you can shift peek everything and you're probably fine, like it's not going to matter. But when you get into silver, this is where you have to start understanding how to actually peek in Valorant, because people have the reaction time and they understand at least how to shoot enough that shift peeking is not going to work. You're moving too slow and people will be killing you before you're able to even see them. So when it comes to recommended agents, the agents I've added onto here are agents like Killjoy, Raze, and Sova. In silver, this is where you're actually starting to use your utility more. I like KJ because when it comes to a Sentinels, she's very, very simple. Her mollies are great at stalling pushes, same with her alarm bot. Her turret's great for just getting you information. Raze is also great because she punishes really poor positioning, which again, silver players have pretty bad positioning on average. And then Sova's similar with his shock darts, but also his drone is very important for fishing out like operators. It's great for getting your team onto sites. So when it comes to how to climb, the biggest thing I think is learning how to wide swing as well as how to jiggle peek. So before this point, it's likely you weren't doing any of this. Knowing how to jiggle and getting that info by jiggling is really good for your team. When it comes to wide swinging, if you're shift peeking everything still, you are going to just die. If you wide swing, you have a much better chance of actually getting a kill on somebody who's holding an angle or playing in a specific spot. I'd suggest watching videos on how to wide swing. It's not that complicated, but doing it in your games is very, very important. The second thing is, of course, positioning yourself properly. I talked a bit about this already, but basically just make sure when you're holding an angle, you're not exposed to some other angle from the side. Make sure you have an escape, play near cover, and play to your weapon's strength, whether that be a long-range weapon, a short-range shotgun. Make sure you're playing in angles that complement that weapon's range. And then the last thing is to start using off angles. So a lot of times before silver, you could just take head-to-head fights. It'll work 100% of the time, but in silver especially, you'll notice a lot of people don't tend to clear a lot of uncommon angles. And because of that, if you're able to take advantage of off angles that people are not going to clear usually, you'll find yourself getting a lot of free kills from people who just don't clear you. Yeah, just take advantage of those off angles when you can, and you'll be climbing out of silver in no time, hopefully. The next rank on the list is, of course, gold. When it comes to gold, the biggest mistake I see is people playing in the same spot every round, or just having the same strategy every single round, pretty much. Especially on defense, if you have better aim than the average gold player, you can pretty much play the exact same way, and players on the enemy team are not going to adapt to you, and that, and that can just work. But if your aim is on par with the other players in this rank, you're going to 50-50 a lot of your gunfights. Being able to change things up is very important. The next thing is that they don't clear angles properly. I talked about in silver about how playing off angles is so powerful. And in silver, you can kind of get away with not clearing angles as often because people just aren't using those off angles, and they might just not be playing in cheese angles in general. But in gold, there's pretty much no excuse. When you're pushing into a site, you have to clear angles. You have to check every position that an enemy could be sitting in, because if you don't, this will definitely cost you rounds. Gold players have good enough aim that if nobody checks them and there's 3 players, they'll probably get all 3 or at least 2 of those kills. In gold, you definitely have to learn how to clear angles and start doing it for sure. When it comes to recommended agents, this is where I started adding agents like Jet and Omen. This is a rank where I don't think every agent is necessarily accessible. If you do one of the harder agents, you might be able to get them, but in general, I would just recommend playing with more straightforward yet powerful agents. In terms of like the meta, I don't think the meta matters yet. As long as you're comfortable on your agent and you're able to play your role decently well, then I think that's pretty much all you need. When it comes to how to climb, I would say definitely the first thing to focus on is practicing your clears. Learning how to slice the pie is an extremely important skill. Understanding how to clear angles without exposing yourself to multiple angles at the same time is extremely important, especially as you climb higher and higher up the ranks. But in my opinion, it all starts here in gold. The next thing I would say is this is where you should start pressing tab before all of your rounds. Before this, it's kind of okay to not have all the information. It's not exactly necessary to know if your opponent can full buy or not, but in gold, this is where I truly believe that you should be keeping track of all the opponent's ultimates. You should know how much money they have, and that should dictate some of the decisions you make. For example, when I said don't play the same spot every round, this is especially true when ultimates are online. If you're playing somewhere on a site where you know the enemy team has like a KO ult and like raised his ult, you definitely don't want to play on site because they're just going to turn off all your utility and then just overwhelm you with using raise ult to just kill you for free. So there are a lot of times where just pressing tab, seeing those ultimates are online, and just deciding to play off-site for a round and playing a retake could just win you a round that you had no business winning. And then last but not least, it's of course switching things up. Just in general, playing a different spot every round or every couple rounds. Switch sites on defense, especially if you're a sentinel. You want to keep the enemies on their toes, and you can just kind of take advantage of the fact like, oh, they've been going A, B, A, B, A, B. Well, this round I'm going to just be in the site that they're going to rush, and it's going to be like a free round for you. So, but with that, that's all I have to say for gold, so let's get into the next one. Next on the list is, of course, platinum. Honestly, this is probably my least favorite rank. I honestly hate platinum so much. To be honest, the average plat player is actually a bozo. I don't know what else to say. They have the egos of an ascendant player, but like pretty much none of the skill to back it up. So the first common mistake I see is just playing on autopilot. This is honestly a huge one for this rank, because you'll notice like a lot of players in plat will turn their brain off and they'll just start doing things without actually thinking or having a reason for why they're doing this thing. And this is probably one of the biggest reasons why I see higher level players lose to plat, is because plat players are doing stuff that make no sense, because if that person was thinking for even a second, they wouldn't have done the thing they just did, and this catches a lot of them off guard. But it's something that like will win you half your games and lose you the other half. And speaking of winning and losing half your games, a lot of plat players take way too many 50-50s. They love to just swing, take a aggressive fight against another person that's not advantageous to them in any way. This is a huge problem I see in plat, and it's something that if you want to climb out of this rank, you need to understand this and understand that the opponents are going to be doing this and use that to your advantage. When it comes to recommended agents, I think plat is where you can almost play every agent. In general, agents like Cypher are great. This is the rank where I think Viper is a great agent to start introducing into your pool. KO and Sky are also great options as well. And then all the other agents we talked about before. Honestly, when it comes to this rank, you can pretty much play whoever you want, whoever you feel comfortable on, and it's probably alright. I wouldn't stress too much about the agents you are playing, but definitely try to pick agents that are at least decent on the map that you're playing on is probably the biggest thing for plat. Not necessarily the meta picks, but as long as they're like good or decent on that map, then they're probably fine. So when it comes to how to climb, the first thing has to do with conditioning your opponents. In plat, a lot of players are pretty much playing checkers, and you have to be able to take it to the next step and start playing chess. Almost like you're training your dog to like sit. Platinum players are extremely easy to condition. Conditioning is a very, I want to say, more abstract concept, but effectively what it is when you do something multiple times, eventually that becomes the norm and it becomes what's expected. So if you peek an angle like 3 or 4 times in a row, you know, in gold, players sometimes they just won't adapt and you can keep getting away with that. But in platinum, this is where players start to actually adapt to what you're doing. And because of that, being able to condition them one way and then take advantage of that conditioning later in the game is extremely important. A great example of this is something I like to do with Cypher on Haven, where you just throw a cage down A long on attack and just use that cage to just hide what you're doing. And for the first 3, maybe 4 rounds, you don't use that cage at all. You're not pushing up in any way with it. And eventually by round 4, round 5, when you do decide to actually walk up short off your cage, the enemy team is not going to expect you, and you're probably going to get free kills just because they're not holding short anymore, because they're just accustomed to you throwing down that cage. Besides that, the next thing is using your utility. Up until platinum, you can get away with not really using your util properly at all, and you'll probably be alright as long as you're able to aim decently well. But when it comes to platinum, if you want to climb out of this rank, you pretty much have to use your utility at least decently well. You have to understand like the timings on your abilities, like playing behind smokes and throwing a Sova dart to just get free scans and free kills through smokes is extremely strong, and it's so free in plat because people just don't shoot the dart in plat, period. This is also where I think playing in smokes is very strong, but again, this comes down to the conditioning. If you play in your smoke 2 or 3 times in a row, well, the 4th time they're going to start spraying the smoke. So I suggest using that to your advantage. Just don't do that every single round, or you that will end up backfiring. And the last thing is just stop committing to every fight. So just because someone is shooting in your general direction doesn't mean you have to wide swing them and take the fight. If you see somebody, in my opinion, just try to reposition yourself every single time you see an enemy. If you peek somebody, shoot a bullet or 2 and go and peek them from a new angle this time. Because again, plat players are playing checkers. They're not thinking about what your next move is. All they are is whatever they see is what they're playing for. And if you showed yourself at a specific angle and then suddenly you appear at a different angle, you will 100% catch a lot of people off guard, and you'll probably get some free kills just for doing that. And that's just one of the ways you can take those 50-50s and put them more into your favor. Hopefully this was clear when it comes to plat. That's pretty much all I have to say for this rank. So let's move on to the next one, which is, of course, Diamond. So one of the big things I see in Diamond is that they just play too passively. Diamond players will use their utility, but only in response to the enemy doing something. But rarely will Diamond players ever use their utility to actually take space for themselves. Especially on defense, this is where I notice it the most, where players tend to just play back of a site or like somewhere on a site or like CT or something like that. But honestly, if you want to climb out of this rank, you have to be much more active with your utility to be able to get early info for you and your team in order for your team to know when to rotate and make them use their utility before they actually get to a site. The next mistake I see is a lot of players going off solo dolo, as I like to call it. In Diamond, this is the rank where generally you're not going to be able to just do everything on your own. You're going to need to rely on your teammates to handle some of the things for you. You're going to have to start playing off your teammates. You're going to have to start calming with them, coming up with a game plan with them. Most of the players are playing by themselves. So if you take it into your own hands to bring your team together and play off of each other, you'll have a much easier time in this rank and you'll find yourself climbing way, way quicker. And also, this is a rank where players are a lot more consistently decent and where you can actually rely on them to be able to handle some of the roles that they're supposed to be able to handle. Definitely start using or taking advantage of your teammates' skill sets when you start getting into Diamond. When it comes to recommended agents, Diamond is a rank where you can pretty much pick the meta agents, and that's going to be your best bet. You're probably good enough to play those agents on the maps that they're best at. And honestly, there's a reason those agents are considered the best on those maps. Their utility just works the best there, and if you're able to take advantage of that, you probably should. If your goal is to climb, I would suggest trying to get good at those meta agents when you start hitting around that Diamond rank. When it comes to climbing, starting in Diamond, you have to be proactive with your utility, and you're going to notice when you start doing this, like how effective this actually is. It doesn't make sense to just swing out of a smoke dry when you don't know what's on the other side, so you need to still like have you or your teammate throw a flash and swing out of that smoke as if somebody is there. Because if they are there, you want to be able to get that kill and not die yourself. And the thing is, even if someone isn't there, you're still able to take that space very safely. And now whoever was playing on that site with you is free to rotate over because now you're able to catch rotates over to your site way earlier so that they'll have the time to actually rotate back to you. And then if an enemy is there, well, then you just got yourself a free kill or two. So the next thing you need to do if you want to climb is to start setting up plays with your team. You'll notice in Valorant when you start doing this that utility is better when used in conjunction with your teammates' utilities. They just combo so well a lot of the time. Smokes work so well with flashes. Mollies and grenades work so well with like Sage slows or other CC like stuns or like Astropole. And like once you start setting up these combos, you're just going to be getting a bunch of free kills that you otherwise wouldn't get if you weren't working on setting up these plays. And it's not just setting up plays, but you have to be able to play off of your teammates as well. Sometimes when it comes to playing off your teammates, it's very much like impromptu, like in the moment, and it's not something that was set up beforehand. Stuff like crossfires, knowing how and when to peek off of your teammates' contact, being patient and not swinging until, you know, your teammate does actually get in that fight. You have to be able to hold your water and not be, you know, frightened by the first sound that you hear. Also, another thing to mention here is it's not just about being able to play off your own utility anymore. You now have to understand how all of your teammates' utility works and know how to play off their utility as well. A KJ knows how to play off her turret, but if your Jet and your KJ has a turret, you have to be able to play off of it as well. When you're in Diamond, you should know how all these agents function, and you should know kind of how to use their utility, even if you haven't played them yourself. And if you start doing this, you're going to notice the game starts to get a lot easier. And each of your games will feel more stable as you're just doing these things more naturally. But yeah, I guess that's it for Diamond. So let's get into the last rank, which is, of course, Ascendant. A lot of Ascendants are pretty good at Valorant, but you'll notice in this rank there's a very mixed bag, where some people are here because their aim is really good, but they have really bad teamwork skills. Or maybe they're really good at playing with the team, but their aim is only like okay. And then there are also some players that when you play with them, you honestly have no idea how they even got here. But that being said, there are some common things I do see when it comes to Ascendant. The first one is across the board is I would say the comms are not that great. Sometimes you'll get somebody who comms, but you'd be surprised how even at a rank as high as Ascendant, like a lot of people just either don't communicate or the comms they're giving are not that useful or just flat out incorrect. When it comes to calming, you need to be only calming things that are absolute fact and that you know to be true. Things like what utility you saw get used, which agents you definitely saw or heard. You need to stick to very like short, to the point sentences to not muffle up the comms with a bunch of useless garbage. And yeah, this is just something that I'm not seeing a lot of Ascendant players do. The next thing is players have big egos and their consistency is a problem. So what you'll notice in Ascendant is that one player might have like a crazy game where they get like 25 kills and have like 250, 300, 350 combat score. And then the next game they're playing the same agent, maybe even on the same map, and they're only getting like 120, 130 combat score. And I believe that the consistency goes hand in hand with the ego, where a lot of people think like because they did so well the last game that they're the best player in the world, and then the next game they go in with that attitude and they quickly get humbled. When it comes to recommended agents, again, similar to Diamond, by this point you should be playing the meta agents. It's very, very difficult to play an agent that isn't good on a map and be successful. You pretty much have to play what is considered the best agents, or like at least a viable option. Otherwise, you're going to probably struggle on those maps where your agent isn't very great. When it comes to climbing, again, as I said, start communicating effectively, stick to the facts, get right to the point, don't muffle the comms. The second thing is to just let your teammates carry sometimes. This goes along with the big ego thing, which sometimes if you're having a bad game, but someone else on your team's having a great game, just knowing how not to throw it for that person who's carrying your team is going to get you wins. And that's going to happen sometimes. Sometimes you're going to be the one to carry your team, and that's great. Other times you're going to be having a bad game and someone else is going to be carrying, and you just have to know how to let them carry and not force really bad plays just because you have a big ego. And then the last thing is to just get a duo. This is not 100% necessary. People can definitely climb out of Ascendant without a duo or like a 3-stack, but when it comes to the consistency thing, having at least one other person on your team that you know is reliable and that you can count on, and if they're playing an agent like Sova or the controller, that you don't have to worry about them not knowing how to use their utility properly, can be a very valuable thing. And if you have another friend in this rank, I would definitely recommend trying to, play with them when you can. But that's it for this video. I hope this helped you out. Let me know if there's anything you guys agree or disagree with. Of course, everybody is different, and, maybe you're in silver, but the stuff I talked about in gold is more applicable to you. Feel free to use that, even if you're in a lower rank or higher rank where I was mentioning that information. In general, if you do all these things, I don't see why you wouldn't be able to climb up the ranks. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one.